Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Illini guy Mike Cagley here with Aaron Coe. We are going to preview the Fighting Illini versus the Washington Huskies, a matchup of two 5-2 teams that really are playing in a game that could be the be all end all game of the season when you reflect back at the end of the year on what was the key point. Both teams may point to this particular matchup out in Washington. Now, folks, for those people who are on here, you might know who Aaron Coe is from the Washington side of it. He's the Huskies lead writer for EmeraldCitySpectrum.com. He's obviously also a sports editor, and what I thought was cool is author of the novel High Points. So if you like what you hear here today, you can not only go listen to his stuff and follow him on X, you can go out and buy his book. So I can't say that about most of my guests. Aaron, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this matchup I think is one of the more intriguing ones. It's a fantastic week for Big Ten football. I wish they could spread out some of the good games. I thought there have been a couple lean weeks, and this week is just going to be one of those weeks where if you have YouTube TV, you'll have all four screens on and watching some really good college football. What is the mood out there in Washington coming into this game? That while there's no game that's life or death, and Illinois defensive coordinator Aaron Henry has said, the sun is going to come up tomorrow. But in terms of a college football season and CFP eligibility, the team here that falls to three losses is probably out, and the team that has two losses still has work to do, but at least hope is alive.
Yeah, this is a big one, I think, for both teams and for Washington. Showing that it can dominate some lesser opponents, but sort of hang in for a half with Ohio State and Michigan, but not really be a threat toward the end of those games. 24-6, 24-7 in those two. It is a This is a really good test, I think, to just see where do they fit into the landscape of the Big Ten. Probably somewhere in the middle, but will they be in the upper half or the lower half? This will go a long way toward saying that, I think.
Yeah, and as an Illinois, reporter, the physicality that Illinois seems to have gotten back since the loss at Indiana, even playing against Ohio State, it wasn't the physicality that did them in. It was the ability to say, "Here, you guys, here, you Buckeyes, have the ball inside our territory and see if you can score with it." Three times that did them in. I think there's a glimmer of hope because Illinois is playing more and more physical, more and more Bielema, if you want to say that. But this Washington team, what are they, 23-1 or something, 22-1 in their last 23 games there at home? I mean, this is a scary place for teams to play unless your name's Ohio State.
Yeah, that is the one loss. Yeah, Washington has generally been very good at home. If Washington is decent, they usually win most of their home games. Yeah, it's a good crowd, especially if it's an opponent, and I think the crowd will get up for an Illinois team that they haven't seen, but they know that they're good. So they'll come out. Now that the Mariners have done Washington a favor of being eliminated, they won't be as distracted, and perhaps we'll get into this game. But yeah, it's a fun environment to see a game. And yeah, the physicality is a big question mark for has been really for Washington all year on the offensive line. They've been solid for the most part, but at times against a really physical line, they do struggle in that situation.
So the Washington offense, led by Damon Williams, who I got to be honest with you, I thought had a rough game against Michigan. And that's the first time that I've been watching. I probably watched three of their games this year. That's the first game I thought he looked human. He's really played well. I would have preferred if he could have held off one more week before, and then done that against Illinois. Tell us a little bit about him as quarterback behind this formidable Washington offense.
Yeah, he's been generally been very good at taking care of the football. He had, I think, 2 interceptions in about 250, a little more than that in his career attempts. And then he had 2 interceptions in 4 attempts against Michigan at one point in that game. Threw 3 interceptions. There was a pick six that was dropped that could have been a fourth one early in the game. So yeah, he really struggled. The linebackers were coming off and reading his eyes and got him a few times. So a couple miscommunications between the receiver and Williams also. So we'll see if they clean that up. But yeah, that was very surprising because he's not one that turns the ball over. Can be very electric when he runs with the ball. Got a very quick burst and has some moves out there. Not the biggest guy. I think he's trying to hit 200 pounds. I don't think he's quite there yet. But when he takes off, he can kind of take your breath away because he has that burst and speed for sure.
And what does he have behind him in the backfield? Because in the Big Ten, running the ball, excuse me, inevitably becomes important.
Yeah, and I think that's where Washington has struggled against some of the better opponents this year. And I wouldn't say it's because of the running back. I think Jonah Coleman is a very good back. He's a kind of a bowling ball. Well, has a little Marshawn Lynch in him, I guess. Sorry
Wow.
to bring up a Seattle reference, but he will run some people over. He's only about 5'9", but he weighs around 230. Really a tough kid. Has a few moves too, but a very physical runner that will get some yards after contact. But there just has not, especially against Michigan and Ohio State, just not much room for him. They just got guys on him right when he gets to the line of scrimmage. So, if he can get a couple steps and get going downhill, he can really be a load to bring down. I think he leads the nation in touchdowns still. I think he's got I think it's 12 on the ground plus 1 receiving. So he's a goal line threat and yeah, just a pretty physical runner back there.
Yeah, the bowling ball with legs are never fun to try to deal with. They're always lower than you, and they always
Yeah.
bring a ton of power to bear. It's just not a good way to play. Now, tight end position, there were some injuries in the Michigan game. How is that gonna play out on Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, that could be really rough for Washington. They were already thin at that position. Decker DeGraff is a sophomore who got pressed into duty last year. He was a freshman All American in part just because he had to play. They didn't have much else. And then they got Quentin Moore back this year. He missed almost all of last season, but and he's just a really good, solid blocking tight end, a 6-year senior with a lot of experience. But he got hauled off on a stabilizing board um, against Michigan. Now, thankfully, he's doing well. Long term, everything looks great. I would be pretty surprised if he played this week, though. He could be back in the next week or two. Um, and then they lost their third string tight end against Michigan, apparently for the season, Cade Eldridge. And he was just sort of a solid jack of all trades type. And, just again, a good depth guy. So now you've got 2 true freshmen that have not, I don't think either have appeared in a game at all this season. So if you want to run 2 tight ends, you're bringing in another true freshman to get out there. So if Quentin Moore can't make it back real fast, that's a major concern for Washington. It may change some of the offense that they run. There may be less 2 tight end sets out there.
Yeah, and of course, the offensive line, that's the area that there's a lot of talent, and yet at the same time, you have kinda indicated and looking at the things that there may be some injury concerns on that along the offensive line. What can Illini fans expect from the guys who are protecting Mr. Williams?
Yeah, and Jed Fish is always a little coy with the injuries. Just trying to decipher what he says in the press conferences can be a little tricky sometimes. But left tackle Carver Willis, he's a transfer out of Kansas State. Not an all league kind of guy, but just a solid left tackle that they had been lacking. Played really well, but he has missed the last couple of games. And I think Jed Fish said, I think his words were, we're hoping to get him back. So I don't know what that means, but I'd be a little surprised if he plays, I guess. And then they have true freshman left guard John Mills, who just turned 18 the other day, and he is 6'6", 240 pounds. has played very well for a true freshman, but I don't know if he's going to be back either. So that's that left side of the offensive line, and then if they also lost their backup left tackle when last week against Michigan. So now if Carver Willis can't make it back, you're down to the third string guy who has a couple starts under him, but obviously you don't starting your third string left tackle, not always a recipe for success.
Yeah, yeah. Illinois has been there and done that. Of course, that was part of the issue. I don't think you can blame it all, 63-10 loss, all of it on that. But Illinois was down. I think they had injured 7 DBs who were injured. So about the only thing we didn't see was Coach Bielema squeeze on a number 10 and jump out there and play some DB for the Illini, and he might have been more successful. So this team is going to have to deal with Illinois' defense. Illinois has had a decent pass rush this year. Obviously, Gabe Yakas is one who has played well. How has this team dealt with the big pass rusher this season?
They've done okay. I haven't seen them get just wrecked by one player. It feels like their whole line can get pushed back a little bit, but it's never just one spot where they really struggle. If Damon Williams gets the ball out quickly, they don't typically give up a lot of sacks, but he will from time to time, just because he has that ability to escape. Sometimes he will hold the ball a little bit with the hope of finding something. So he's taken kind of some of those kind of sacks. But yeah, I think they're solid but unspectacular, I guess, was how I would say it. They're going to give up some pressure, but maybe not a ton of sacks that kind of come out of nowhere. But we'll see what happens there.
And how talented are the wide receivers? Because I know there's at least one guy who the NFL draft gurus really like. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about those gentlemen out on the outside.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix. We knew all along that Denzel Boston, he's a fourth year junior, 6'4", over 200 pounds, runs really well, really good hands, really good body control, can catch it in traffic. He's a really good player and a difference maker out there. And then it's a whole bunch of talented but very inexperienced players. They lost Rashid Williams early in the season. He should be back in a couple of weeks, but even he didn't have a lot of experience. So now you've got two true freshmen starting. Both of them look very promising. Raiden Vines Bright plays in the slot. He can also play outside. They'll mix it up a bit, but he's kind of come on lately, really talented player. And then they've got Desmond Roebuck, who's also a true freshman. Just one of those guys that wasn't highly recruited, wasn't offered by Arizona, 20 miles from his high school. But just one of those guys that gets open, finds spots in the zone, very savvy, very good hands, and just finds a way to get it done. So he's been a real bright spot for Washington this season.
Wow. So it sounds like this is going to be a lot of fun. Illinois going up against Washington. And of course, we will go and talk a little bit about the defense and the special teams. But before we do that, one of the things that we wanted to talk about is Delete Me. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make all of us vulnerable. And data brokers make a profit off of your data. Your data is a commodity. Anybody on the web can buy your private details. This can lead to identity theft, phishing attempts, and harassment. But now you can protect your privacy with Delete Me. Make sure your name, contact information, social security number are not stolen and not compiled by data brokers who are trying to make money off of it. So, Delete Me is one of the top picks for data removal services. And of course, one of the things that I like to talk about is somebody with an active online presence. My privacy is really important to me. And of course, if you're out there, have you ever been a victim of identity theft, harassment, or doxing? If you haven't, you might know somebody who is. Delete Me can help. Take control of your data, Keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/HIT and use promo code HIT at the checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to join deleteme.com/hit, enter code HIT at checkout. That's join deleteme.com/HIT, code HIT. So deleteme.com, thank you to those people. And if you get confused, I just say go ahead and hit or say or type hit. So now we're going to get back over to the defense. The Fighting Illini offense has played really well this year. They tend to be a little different than Brett Bielema. They tend to they play better when they get the pass to actually free up the running lanes. What are we going to expect from this the Huskies defense, and maybe start with that defensive line as to what Illinois is going to run into?
Yeah, the defensive line is kind of a mixed bag. I feel like there's not a lot of dynamic players up front. They've performed pretty well against the run for the most part. They have a bunch of bodies, but none of them really, make gigantic plays or anything like that. They'll rotate some guys in and out. But yeah, no, there's no Aaron Donald or anything like that in there. They do have Zach Durfee, who's a pretty decent pass rusher. He's coming off I think an elbow injury is what we were told it was, and he doesn't have a lot of sacks, but he does pressure quite a bit. He's kind of the one guy. If I were going against Washington, he's the one guy I would want to make sure I can kind of keep out of the backfield. Um, but yeah, a lot of just solid bodies, but no one that's just gonna get back there and wreck your quarterback on most days, I would think.
That's good because Illinois has struggled with that. When it comes to linebacking core, how is the Huskies linebacking core? How do they match up with the Illini?
Yeah, that's been an interesting one. So Washington, their base defense is a five-man front. So sometimes they just have one middle linebacker in there, and they have Jacob Manu, who is he's a senior coming off an ACL injury, came back against Ohio State a few weeks ago, but I think they want to redshirt him, or he wants to redshirt. He's a very good player, but maybe not an NFL guy, or maybe a third day pick at best sort of a player. So he'd like to play out another year. So I don't know if he'll play. They've kind of been picking and choosing when to play him. So I don't know if he'll play on Saturday or not. I think he's their best player in the front seven. Personally, he's the one guy that's kind of dynamic and just kind of pops on film when you watch it, just kind of a playmaker. And then before he came back, they had a transfer from Washington State named Buda Al Ukda, but he's out for the season now. So now you're kind of, that now you got like a third string linebacker in there, and they've played okay. Devin Bryant will get in there a lot. And Exree Alexander has made some plays the last few weeks. But yeah, so if number 9 Manu plays, he's going to make some plays. The other guys are going to struggle sometimes, especially covering tight ends and things like that. So that could be an issue depending on who's available for Washington.
Yeah, how's the defensive backfield overall? Do you expect them to match up well? I know the Illini with Hank Beatty have really surprised, in terms of overall effectiveness from the wide receiver position.
Yeah. So where does Beatty play? Is he outside or more of a slot guy?
He's a slot guy he does literally, they can put him anywhere. Here's the advantage is the kid is a quarterback in high school.
Hmm.
So he knows the whole field, and so they've done some fantastic work with him. He's thrown a touchdown pass, and they can actually run the wildcat with him, and he obviously can, he can run at either position. He's really more of a slot guy, but he's the true definition of a Swiss Army knife.
Okay. Yeah, that could be good for the Illini. I think on the outsides in particular, Washington is very strong. They've got two 6'4" senior corners out there and Ephesians Prysock. And Takario Davis had missed a few games with a rib injury, but he's supposedly fully healthy now, and he may be Washington's best defensive player when fully healthy. Now in the slot, it can get a little bit dicey. They've had Leroy Bryant in there and Rashawn Clark playing the slot. Both have been decent at times, and both have had their share of struggles. And again, if you get matched up on a linebacker for Washington, that's going to be advantage Illini for sure, especially with Beatty out there. And so I think those two corners, it's going to be very tough to get a lot on the outside on those two guys. They've got Alex McLaughlin playing a box safety. Been a pleasant surprise this year, transfer from Northern Arizona. He's not a huge guy, but a good hitter, has a couple interceptions this year. And then Mikel Steen is the other safety, and he's a solid player. He's got a couple picks as well. But really the strength is those two outside corners. It's been really tough for teams to get much out there. But yeah, you might be able to make some hay with Beatty, going against a couple of those slot corners.
Well, that's a little hopeful for the Illini. The other question I have is, it's interesting, but has this just been one of those snake bit years in terms of injuries for the Huskies? Because boy, there's a lot of key people who've either been injured or are injured that you're mentioning. Is that been something that has affected them, just this season, or is it one of those chronic things? Because Illinois has they've had a lot less injuries this year, and the last 2 years prior have dealt with a lot of injuries.
Yeah, I think the last few weeks it's been just some bad luck. The first few weeks they stayed pretty healthy. And then, yeah, when you lose your left tackle and your left guard, that's tough. And then two tight ends go down in one game last week. So it's really been the last couple of weeks that they've had injuries. Now, most of these are apparently not long-term injuries. So some of these guys are going to come back, as we talked about before. Who I don't know if that's this Saturday or 3 weeks from now. Hard to tell with the information that we're given. But yeah, the last couple of weeks have been pretty tough with injuries. And like I said, it's when you're bringing in a true freshman to back up a senior, that you're going to have some issues there for sure.
Yeah. um, when you look at the special teams, how have they done in the kicking games?
Yeah, I think the coverage teams for the most part have been very good. Denzel Boston is the punt returner. He's got one taking one back for a touchdown. Now that was against might have been against UC Davis. It was against not the strongest opponent, but he's a threat back there. The kicker is he a fifth or sixth year senior? Grady Gross, solid guy. He hit one from over 50 earlier in the year. He did against Rutgers 2 weeks ago, and then another one against Michigan this last week. But he's usually pretty solid. The punter's been a little bit iffy. He's a transfer from Oregon. Luke Dunn is his name, and he'll boom one, and then he'll kind of shank one, and it'll go 32 yards. So you just never quite know what you're getting from him at times. But yeah, coverage wise, they really haven't allowed any or not many major returns. They haven't really broken a whole lot, I would say, especially on the kick return side. But yeah, they're solid, I would say, on special teams, but nothing dynamic, I guess.
Okay. And overall, how do you see this game going? If you were going to try to, obviously, we can't see the future, but people ask us what we think. How do you
Yeah.
think this game's going to go? And have you decided on who you think the winner is going to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I picked every game before the season started, and I picked Washington to win 26-21 at that point. Just because Husky Stadium is a very tough place to play, and outside of Ohio State, no one has won there in 3 years. So it's it can be a daunting environment when the crowd gets really into it. Yeah, but it's hard to. I'm not going to give my official prediction. I may.
We
What I'm
understand.
saying is I may change this as the week
Yep,
goes
that's
along,
fair.
and if I get more of an indication on who might play or not play. But yeah, it's going to be a really interesting game because for me, at least in our minds out here, this is kind of okay. Which one of these teams is real? So the they've both taken lumps a couple times by some top opponents, um, but and they're both decent teams. But who emerges to be in the upper half of the Big Ten? So I think it's a really fascinating game that way. I will stick with that 26-21 pick. I think it'll be around that score. And if Damon Williams keeps throwing interceptions, that's not going to be the score.
Yeah,
But I'll stick with 26-21 Washington for right now.
perfect.
For another 5 minutes anyway.
Yeah, I look at this as being a very close game, and I think it really may come down to Luke versus Demond in turnovers. And if Illinois turns over the ball less, I think they have a really good shot of winning. But they found out playing against Ohio State, you can't give up 3 turnovers to a really good team and expect to be in the game. And then they found out that Indiana, sometimes when there's a steamroller, you just got to try to get out of the way, and they couldn't get out of the way in time. Got flattened. Just wasn't their night. And but I do think this game, very rarely people who follow Illini guys, I do not say like this is a make or break, and I don't know if this is quite that. But if Illinois wins this, they've got 2 losses and they'll be favored in every game. The problem with Illinois is they're good enough to beat every team on their schedule, and they're also good enough that if they don't play well, they can get beat by any team on the schedule. And especially with teams like Northwestern rising from the dead, a team that you thought early in the season like UCLA was going to be an easy W, and now all of a sudden, you've got them at or the Wildcats at 5-2. All of a sudden, that game at the end of the year changes its personality, and of course, Washington will probably be favored in every game except one. Both these teams, this is a business critical game.
Yeah.
As you look at it, any other thoughts or any other things that Illini fans should know? One of the questions I guess I always kind of concerned for is what's the best pizza in town?
Oh boy, there's some decent places. I think a place that has multiple places to go is called Pagliacci's. It's around the Seattle area. That's pretty
Okay,
good. Dick's Burgers is pretty solid. We love that around here. So those are the couple key places.
perfect.
Yeah, so that's always good. But yeah, it should be. I haven't. I think maybe the weather's going to be iffy. I'll have to look at that. That can, of course, be a factor up here this time of year. But yeah, it's a pretty, Husky Stadium's a pretty cool venue to check out. So for those who are coming out, it's kind of a neat place to see a game. I would say, especially like I said, if the fans are really into it, that's a pretty fun place to visit. But yeah, it should, like you said, this will be it's a very important game for both teams and could go either way. And yeah, like you said, there's a lot of like you mentioned UCLA, Washington plays them, and that was one that you just put a check mark next to earlier. And now down there, strange things happen in the Rose Bowl. So who knows where this team's headed? But yeah, it should be a fun one on Saturday though.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Of course, folks, if you enjoyed this, IlliniGuys.com, $99 a year, 27 cents a day. We'll get you all of our information. You get access to all the stories. Most importantly, you get the message boards where you can talk with Brad, Ked, Matt, Larry, or myself, and along with the thousands of Illini fans that you can talk back and forth about Illini sports, and you can have the collective panic attacks when things go bad, and obviously celebrate when things go good. And don't forget the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular is on, so please go ahead and grab that. Either listen to it on the radio or get the podcast. And finally, of course, the YouTube channel, IlliniGuys.com. Please go to that. And anytime you can share our audio or video podcast, we hugely appreciate it. Get more Illini fans or Big Ten fans involved in watching that. And of course, Ked and Brad, myself, and others will be back with our halftime show on YouTube during the game, so you don't have to watch guys talk about what's going on around the country. You can just talk. We can just talk right about the first half, and of course, post game, you'll get to see again Brad, Ked, myself, possibly Steve Sturm, Jonathan Kerr. You can watch us cry like little babies, or you can watch us exult and celebrate the victory. It's going to be a great game on Saturday, and we would love if you share some of your time with the Illini guys. Until then, go Illini.